Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be in the world following this Laibon talk series. This has been something that's been ongoing for the past few months, especially in this period where things have been somewhat disrupted by the coronavirus. This talk session has been on different subjects, but we thought as a Laibon Association, speaking on behalf of the Laibon Association, that it may be a good idea to bring the people from the different schools together, particularly with the question of the resumption of education being a very live issue right now. We're obviously expecting some announcements to be made fairly quickly by the authorities concerned. Excuse me. And so as alumni, we are very invested in what goes on. And also for some of us who may be parents and guardians, and that conversation is a very live one in our households with regards to what will happen with the resumption of education for our students, our children, and all that. So this talk series, or at least this particular one, will be exploring these issues. And the format that we've decided to take is one where we've invited some school principals. We have two of them today, Lenana School and Alliance. They will be taking us through what their perspective is, at least from the perspective of school management, because they manage these schools, and these schools are fairly large, fairly diverse student communities. And then we have some people who are here, and what these people, who these people are, is they represent different schools, not just Lenana and Alliance, but also schools that will come in with different perspectives. But the most important thing today is for us to actually get and engage in that general discussion. So we will try and build in as much time as we can to do this once we have those people speaking. By way of introduction, my name is Wallace Kantai from Lenana School, the class of 1990 to 1993. I was in Tomboya House, and I'll be your moderator for this afternoon. Before we begin with the discussion, I'll just have Pascal, I'll have Frank introduce the members of the committee. I think that's a nice thing to do. And once he does that, without even me coming back in, Pascal will put up what is already put up, which is the rules. I'll go through those very briefly, and then we'll go straight to Mr. Kemei. So Frank.
Thank you very much, Wallace. By way of introduction, my name is Frank Mutua, and I am the current chair of the Laibon Society, which is the Alumni Association of Lenana School. And, it's a great honor to host all of you during today's session. This is a series that we began about 6 weeks back. So we have a weekly conversation covering different topics, and the impact that COVID has had. And we bring on board, competent people from each space to just be able to share with us what the outlook is and allow us to, to be able to make informed decisions in whatever area we're in. The team that helps put this together, we have with us, I'll start with Martin Mogwanja. Martin was in Lenana School between 68 and 73. As I always say, he left slightly before me. I only left 24 years later. I think, or was it 33 years later? And Martin helps us, coordinate and keeps us on the straight and narrow. We have John Ojara. John was there between 84 and 88. And John is the one who does the flyers, the graphics, and ensures with everything we do, we are in alignment to our school's brand manual. And we have Pascal Mwele. Pascal left the school in the year 2000. And Pascal is one who hosts this Zoom conversation and puts everything together behind the scenes, and we really appreciate him for that. Then we have Sydney Ashoya. Sydney is the class of 2003, and Sydney is the gentleman who does our communication as the Laibon Society. So our emails, our social media accounts, and does live tweeting during each of these sessions. So that's the team, and asanteni sana.
Muted. So there you go. So thank you very much. And Pascal has put up the meeting rules, and I think because all of us went to very good schools, obviously and evidently, the rules are fairly simple. Please keep your mic muted. I know a lot of us will be in the home environment, which can be surprisingly noisy. So please keep your mic muted when the presenters are speaking until you're let in if we are in the Q&A session and you're the one who's asking the question. Turn off your video unless you're particularly want to show us something very attractive, but please don't do that. Then the chat functionality actually is going to be our main use device for today. So you can ask questions there. There's a lot of people flooding in, just establishing themselves in terms of the classes and schools they went to. Please continue doing that so to know just representatively who's here. And yeah, like we said, the next bullet point is about introducing yourself in terms of which school and which year you are doing. The verbal questions will only be taken once you raise your hand and I give you the opportunity to ask your question. Please keep it brief. We have very limited time to engage in a very, very complicated set of questions. So if you do go into verbal questions, if you just ask one, it will be good because that gives us an opportunity to take in as many. So without further ado, welcome to today's function. And as is usual with a lot of changes, funkies, we have way more men than we have women, which is a very sad reflection on the capacity of changes to organize a good function. But we'll still deal, and we expect for this thing to be a bit more gender balanced as we go on. Without further ado, I want to introduce Mr. William Kemei. He is the principal of Lenana School and has been so for the last few years. He came in at a time when there's a lot of changes going on, huge influxes of students going by what the government decided by way of some of our schools and the capacity that they have. So he's been managing the school at a fairly critical and difficult moment. So he has lots of experience in that, but nothing has been more critical than what's happened in the last 3 or 4 months, which is the coronavirus, what that has meant for the education sector, and now looking forward where we're going. So Mr. Kemei, karibu, and please go ahead and make your speech or presentation. Just one quick one, you're muted again.
Okay, my video?
There you go, now you can talk.
Okay. Thank you, Kantai, for that introduction. As you rightly indicated, I joined Lenana School about right now 3 years, and at the period when there's been a lot of transition. But I want to thank the Board of Management together with the old boys who have been very supportive through this journey. And I must admit that Lenana is one of the prime institutions in this country, currently having a total population of 1,738 students and a staff of 82 teaching staff. And we are quite endowed at this moment to have had the interaction. It has brought value, addition in what we are doing. And therefore, today, I would want to focus on what we want to discuss. As a school, you're all aware, we have developed a strategic plan that is guiding us. We launched it early in this year, largely because Lenana School is not a young institution. Lenana School has come of age, it has seen the test of time, and with growth and the changes and reforms in the education sector, you would expect, of course, Lenana School also to be up and respond positively to all the needs of the education in this country and beyond. And therefore, at a time like this, we would ask ourselves, where are we? Where would we want to go, and what are we going to do about getting back to the normal that we would think of? And therefore, I wish just to highlight is in pursuit of excellence, a school environment that will enable all the young people that turn up in the Lenana School to succeed in their careers in the years to come. And therefore, mine is just to thank the able team of the old boys who have supported us in achieving this strategic plan. I would have, if there was time, I would have delved deeper into the areas of concern that right now become more urgent and of priority than before we set off to the task of establishing a team to look into what future holds for this school. And one of the things that I would like us to look at is we have an institution that has been serving this nation in diverse generations. First of all, we know that Lenana School was serving the white settlers, or rather, in that period, a generation of students who came from likely background that were not challenged. But right now, we are dealing with a candidate or a group of students who are seriously challenged. And therefore, we have more challenges in terms of transition, access, and even completion of school. Today, as we engage in this conversation, one of the challenges dealing with as I engage with the parents is the future of the Alumni handling this morning, the all morning. Going to that is one of the issues that I feel is very urgent as we go forward. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, as we face COVID-19, it gives us an opportunity, though it comes with challenges, but I feel it's an opportunity for each of the institutions to reflect and look at what the future will be. And the most important thing at this point is that we will be guided largely by how the institution is set up. And in the current situation, we are handling a pandemic that the only people who can give proper direction are the public health. And as we even wait for the direction by the Education Task Force, I still believe strongly that institutions can have their own preparedness. And in this context, there are lessons that we have learned. And one of the lessons that I have learned over this period, and we have consulted widely with all the stakeholders, is that this pandemic is coming at a time when we have been handling a huge population in our classrooms. Number two, we have not yet been guided exactly how the distancing will be managed. We have approached this as an institution with a lot of carefulness. And one of them is to look at how our classrooms have been. And in our case at Lenana School, we are looking at how we can expand the classrooms. And the only way to expand the classroom is to split a class into two. And in this case, when you look at the number of classrooms that we do have, we have always had a shortage of classrooms for the last about 6 or so years. However, we want to thank the government who have come in strongly to support us. Right now, we just completed 6 new classrooms. Had we known that COVID was going to set in, maybe the design and the structure of those particular classrooms would have been totally different. But going forward to the current situation, we do know and understand that the task force is establishing protocols that will be followed by the institution. But on our own as an institution, we have addressed this on 3 levels. Number 1 is the boarding facilities. Number 2, the tuition facilities. And number 3, the public health safety precautions that we need to put in place. In terms of boarding facilities, we are looking at how to make sure that the spacing within the dorms is adequate enough. We're also looking at how, as I mentioned earlier on, that the classrooms can only accommodate between 20 to 25 at most. And therefore, that gives you a challenge on how to provide additional classrooms for such a population. In terms of the facilities, what we're looking at are specifically shared facilities. This is a strange scenario of what, where we are in, and therefore the shared facilities include the spaces in the houses, together with the washrooms and toilets. These are very unique. It's a very unique time because we are dealing with buildings that were done over 70 years ago. So you cannot talk of expanding that particular building unless you decongest by building a new building. For our case is Lenana School, you do know very well that we lost from the ministry, and right now the public works are finalizing on the BQs and the drawings for the new dormitory with a capacity of 600. We do believe that already we were at a level where our dormitories were already congested, and we had over 500 students who needed to be given extra space. If we go ahead and complete this new facility that will accommodate about 600, then we are sure that we will have decongested to an extent. But that does not guarantee then enough distancing to prevent of COVID. Buildings within the school that could largely maybe support spacing out students within their various houses. On the second note is that within the houses as well, you do realize that we have shared toilets and as well as bathrooms or the washrooms for that matter. And we have already put in place measures to increase these facilities. We are putting up an pollution block in block 5 that will give access to additional toilets as well as washrooms. In a standard theft measure, we are required to have one door of a washroom or a toilet to 27 students. We move up to increase those spaces so that the shared facilities are not congested. Secondly, as I mentioned, we look at and touch on so much because I believe the task force will give us direction in how to manage this scenario. However, going forward and looking at the recommendations that have been made, we do believe that given the time that the schools will reopen, our challenge would largely lie on how the teachers will handle the learners within the various spaces or in the classrooms. And therefore, we're looking at how to introduce more use of ICT, use spaces like laboratories that are more spacious, equip them with more smart boards, and use more peer teaching, where teachers can share lessons, where lessons can also be shared across classes so that fewer staff are able to do that. Already the teaching staff are on with teaching lessons with students while they're at home, and they're using platforms like the Zoom. They're using platform like the setup we have in school, Seraki, that is able to reach all the students. We're also using WhatsApp media and Google platforms to reach most of these students. So we are asking ourselves, in our staff meeting last week, one of the biggest questions was almost 50% of our teaching staff are people who are at age which you could say is vulnerable. Sorry. I was just mentioning that our teaching staff is a group that a larger group of our teaching staff. When we took the statistics, we realized that over 40% or thereabout are people who may not, who could be vulnerable because of one challenge or another. And therefore, within the period, we may read a situation whereby a given number of teachers will be able to handle a large group of students. That will require that we use spaces like the main halls, the dining halls, the libraries, and larger rooms that can accommodate more students, but with adequate space. That is the second challenge that we feel strongly would require a better strategy going forward. What we have done currently is to repair some of the existing classes and laboratories, so that then when that time comes, we will not have the disadvantage of only using the classrooms. Secondly, the new classrooms affords us also another opportunity that the extra spaces that were available could still be utilized, like the lecture hall, the computer room, the ICT room, the aviation classes that were being done at Block 4 will also provide some additional space. However, as I mentioned earlier on, some of these spaces might also be utilized as body facilities to the space for dormitories. Now, that challenge, as I said, all of us as stakeholders must prepare for reopening. The government is doing its bit. I believe we will be given direction very soon. And we know that largely whatever is going to take place will be in our own hands as management, as parents, as teachers, and as stakeholders. And therefore, one of the preparedness that we need to look at is how the school will receive these learners. And that puts us at a point where we need, means adequate supply of water. Currently, our capacity in the school is about 60 to 65% supply of water. And we need additional to double this so that then we have adequate supply of water round the clock. Provision of personal protective equipment. For a start, we know that we will need masks, we will need sanitizers, we will need gloves, and we will need some personal protective equipment for both especially those who are going to interact with the students. For our case at Lenana School, we have a sanatorium that is fairly equipped and staffed, although we will still need to look at its role within the COVID period. We are rather ahead of time because our staff within the sanatorium were trained during the quarantine period, and we feel they have guided the institution for the short period in a very good way. Currently, we have thermal guns within the school main entrance. So anybody who enters the school, they have to be tested, their temperature, they have to sanitize, there are dispensers within the compound. We have all dispensers around all the blocks. But because of the number of students that we have, the current ones have been serving the staff. We have gone ahead to increase water points so that then when the students report back, we will have enough and adequate supply of water. Our challenge currently is that we rely on supply of water from boreholes. Whenever there is a shortage of power, then it means there is no supply of water. So we would need to think about a powered generator for the supply of water and an additional borehole within the school that will help us reduce the shortage of water. When we look at our institutional facilities, I would want to say that public health requires that in such a situation, you're able to dispose of whatever waste in a proper manner. And therefore, we need to put in place waste disposal mechanisms that will help the institution as we cope with this challenge. We also believe that now that our sanatorium is registered as level 2 hospital, more added advantage will come to this. We have requested for additional personnel from the Ministry of Health. We hope, as suggested by many forums and by many parents, that going forward, maybe these sanatoriums will be further supported by the Ministry of Health and Public Health. I would want to, I think I've just gone through, I just want to look at what support we need as an institution. Number one, we know very well that this is a very unique period of time. Nobody has ever experienced this before. We have never handled a pandemic of such a magnitude. We know a few things that we have learned. Number one, we know that people with existing conditions are more vulnerable. So how do we prepare as an institution to deal with students with existing conditions? And are we able to manage that? And what changes do we need to put in place? And this is where I think our colleagues and alumni in the medical field will help and guide us on this line. The second thing that we have also learned is that men are more vulnerable. I say men in quotes because we have listened to statistics all over the world, around the world, and even in our own country. Every day, the CAS mentions, you'll discover that there are more men who have COVID than women. I think that is something that we need to also address. Thirdly, is about the psychosocial support, mental, and even motivation to teaching and learning. This cuts across the students, the teachers, and the workers. And I feel that this is an area that will need a lot of support. Fourthly, under the current circumstances, we are coming at a point where the academic year had just begun. We're going into the middle of the year, and we have students, almost a third of our population will always have fees challenges. So you will need scholarship, fees support, and support for special needy cases within the institution. And then lastly, the fifth one is maybe sustainability of the programs and strategies put in place, both by the institution and by government. There will be new ways of doing things, especially like if you're going to do a new timetable for new staff, support staff who are needy, support the non-teaching staff also who are needy, support needy students, support students with pre-existing conditions, do a lot of guidance and counseling, bring in guidance and counseling, something that may need to be done on a regular basis. That needs some sustainability so that it can progress on well and you have a long-lasting solution. Finally, in my comments, I wish to say that education is meant to help people change from a situation that has not been favorable to a more favorable situation. We know currently parents are agonizing. However, we do not know exactly how the curve on COVID will go, but we must sacrifice. All of us must sacrifice to commit ourselves to provide a solution or solutions towards reopening of institutions. We may not know at the time when that happens, it will call for a lot of sacrifice from across all from the government, from the stakeholders, from parents, from alumni, so that then whatever mitigation measures have been put in place can enhance quality education, sustain relevance, and help transition so that the same learners, for instance, my conversation this morning, as I mentioned earlier on, was mainly with the candidates. And some of them are not so sure whether the lockdown will be eased this coming weekend. And if it will not be eased, how will happen? Will they travel and so forth? Those are questions we may not answer now. But my mind is to think that we must be bold enough to look forward as educators, that we must provide solutions, that it is within our mandate to find ways and means of ensuring that education continues. I don't think as human beings will fail on this, but we just need to accept that this is a new normal. Require that we adapt in a very special way so that then our learners will have the confidence to believe that there is a future for them. And therefore, I am sure that returning back to school will require also recovery of lost time and giving hope, more hope to our learners. It will require that, therefore, we start rethinking of what this new normal will be. We have had a staff meeting twice the last 2 weeks, and I want to say that the teachers are happy. They look forward to that time. Some of them have found that their passion is in teaching, and they look forward to that time. But there is only one call, that one of retraining of teachers, so that then they can adapt to new ways of teaching, especially using ICT. And that requires support in terms of training as well as facilitation. I think I would pause at that point so that if there's any addition on comments, I will then take it up from there. Kantai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kemei. That is Mr. William Kemei, who is the current principal of Lenana School. I think he's outlined in quite a great level of detail what the schools, at least from the management perspective, are thinking, what the challenges are from a student population point of view. The only thing that perhaps I would dare correct him on was when he says that the classrooms and their availability and adequacy is only about 5 years old. I can tell you it's more than 30 years old, because even when we were there, the classrooms were starting to sort of strain at the seams with the added population of students. And as you very well know, I think the people who are on this call, when it comes to high school, there's different demands. So there's things like special classrooms for special things. Laboratories are one thing, things like language learning. I remember during our time, there was a French room which was used specifically for that purpose. So the demands are huge. Speaking also about the demands on boarding facilities for boarding schools and everything that we're going to think about. I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Kemei went through. Just a quick one by way of letting you know also the people who are in on this call. I think Frankie introduced us to the Laibon Society committee and especially the people who are organizing this call. But there's also Dr. Samson Degwa, who is the chair of the board of management at Lenana School. The next person I want to introduce in fairly short order is William Mwangi. Mr. Kemei, asante sana. You can disable your mic and your video. Is Mr. William Mwangi. Mr. William Mwangi is the principal of Alliance, but he obviously has a very close set of ties with Lenana School because he is Mr. Kemei's predecessor. And so we got 2 Williams in a row to run the school. So I want to introduce Mr. Mwangi. And Mr. Mwangi, if you're there, you can unmute yourself and show us your video and go ahead and present. If you have continuity challenges, Mr. Mwangi, we might step in and just ask you to disable your video because that takes up quite a bit of bandwidth. But for now, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Kantai. I think I have a small problem. But I want to thank you quite sincerely for this kind of chance. And I really admit that as a country, we have a challenge. I have been to quite a number of schools in this country, having been a principal for the last about 30 years. I have been able to see or witness a number of changes, and I have been able to see the government of Kenya take very, very bold steps in trying to address issues of education in the country. I have seen changes from the system I went through, the 2844. I'm now waiting to see the transition to CBC. I hope you can hear me, can't I? Are we together?
We can hear you perfectly, just continue. In case anything happens, I'll let you know.
Sawa, sawa. I was saying that the issue of COVID is only now is complicating a complicated situation. Because if you realize that when you talk about the time you are in school, is very, very different from the time we are in today. And I believe the time I was in school is very different from the time you were in school also. I was in at a completely different time when things were better. So things are getting changing because of increase in population. We are not able to update our facilities at the same rate at which the population in our schools is increasing. And therefore, the coming in of COVID, as I said, has complicated the issue. You remember about a year ago, the president talked about 100% transition. By so doing, that one congested our facilities. By congesting our facilities, we were now trying to look into ways of how we could ease the same. Unfortunately, now this thing comes in. So it is a complex issue as we are in today. And the best thing that we need to do is not to close schools forever or for a longer period than we have. The best thing we need to do is to open up, but open up the schools slowly so that we are able to address the challenges with a smaller number and we are able to prepare for the bigger number coming in. When you talk of social distancing, it's a complex situation, Our classes have 50, 60, 70. How do you ensure that we are 1 meter, 1.5?
Apologies to everyone. I think Mr. Mwangi might be having a few challenges. Let's wait for him to come back in.
Yes. Okay.
Continue, please.
Okay. Sorry, I was saying that the issue of the issue of social distancing is complicating the entire situation in a sense that we are already overcrowded. But I'm saying again, for us to see how well we address this issue, then we need to open up schools slowly. By allowing in our Form 4s to come in, then I believe that of trying to address the issue slowly by slowly, to see how we accommodate that population in readiness for a bigger population. That's how, and then what do we require in this school? Government has done a lot. Parents are trying their bit. And this is where we are likely to find the usefulness of the old students, the alumni. I'm sure they have been there in the past. I have been to the last four schools I have been to. I have seen some bit of activity. We did do well when I was in Lenana, but I find a more vibrant alumni in Alliance High School, where they seem to be very much involved in the day-to-day activities of the school, not really the running of the school, but what is happening in the school. And since we have old students who are in different fields, I am sure these are people who could come in handy to help us address the situation. We may not go into the details right away, but we need to look at the bold, at a general view on how we need to address this. Because I can see a different paradigm shift in the entire education system, which needs to be addressed now and not later. We need therefore to start quite early.
Mr. Mwangi, there? Mr. Mwangi, are you there? We may have lost him briefly. So as we try and raise him back, just welcoming the people who have joined us in the last few minutes. We're in the middle of a conversation of what happens to the schools after the reopening, which we expect at some point. We don't know whether it's going to be soon or in the far future, but there's a lot of things that need to be put in place for these schools to reopen safely, for the students and staff to be safe, and for education to continue. So we heard earlier from Mr. William Kemei, the principal of Lenana School. He went through quite a bit of detail about what the school currently has and the things that are in progress and in plans and the things that it may need, especially from an alumni point of view. We were in the middle of listening to Mr. William Mwangi, who is a principal of Alliance High School. And so we're trying to raise him. If Mr. Mwangi, you're there, you may continue.
They can hear me, can't I?
Yeah, continue. Endelea.
Okay. I was saying that opening of schools cannot be delayed beyond this, because the programs of the school have to run. And as I said, should we delay any longer, then we are going to be caught up by the CBC getting into the next level. So we need therefore to open up schools. Let's face the challenges as they are, because as we do understand, COVID is here to remain. Just as we have had other kind of diseases in the past. When you talk of leveling of the curve, I hope everyone understands what we are saying. That when you talk of leveling of a curve, it means that the number of cases in a day is similar in every day, every other day. That's what, and for us to achieve that is going to take us some bit of time. We therefore need to open up schools. Let us sort out schools when we are there. Let us engage all the stakeholders to see how we sort out certain problems in schools. As I said, no two schools are the same. And I believe the alumni, the old students of every school would come in hard now. They understand their school, just as you do understand Lenana school. I understand that school. I understand Alliance. I understand Thick High School. And all these are very, very different. And therefore, to me, let's look at the challenges as they are when we are in school with a smaller number. We need to have the number to understand the challenges as the programs move on. We can't afford to have two form ones next year, for example. In 2013, in 2023, we expect another lot of CBC, so we can't afford to eat any longer. We cannot have a way of sorting out these problems wholesale. Though there could be guidelines, one school will differ from the other. There are schools, as I said, that have 70 students in a class. Handling that one is going to be very difficult from the way I handle my 54 students in a class. So let's therefore get there and address them as they are. We need to know, how do we address the students as a crowd? How do we feed them? How are they going to be in class? How do they sleep? Yeah. So to me, trying to sort out problems from afar does really not make much sense. Let's try to get back to school as much as possible to sort out the present problems and the future problems, and appreciate that this problem will be there with us for some time, and we have to learn to live with it. We have not seen this kind of thing before. Many people have not heard of a curfew. I heard of it when I was in university in 1982. And people are getting to understand what it means by this kind of restrictions that we are getting of movement and everything else. But let us get to schools and start off the schools. We don't want to say that this is the way it should be done. We are trying a lot in trying to do, how do we address, for example, how do we ensure that there are washing points? I think there are small things that we are trying to do. How do we get face masks? These are simple things. But they have said the more complex thing is social distancing. How do you ensure that this teacher who goes out every day comes back the same person he or she was yesterday? How do the students react when they suspect that one of them is sick? How do they even react when they suspect or even fake an idea that one of the teachers is sick? It's going to cause a lot of problems. So the earlier we are in it, the better. Let's not solve some problems that are not there as yet. But I want to admit that there's going to be a bigger problem than we have had in the past, can't I? That's my take in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's William Mwangi, the principal of Alliance High School, and the challenge, I think, was the gauntlet was thrown down in terms of the vibrancy of the alumni community. Again, welcome everyone who's been coming in as we have been progressing in this conversation. I just want to do maybe 2 or 3 reminders. Number one, please all disable your microphones and your video. because it also it's quite a bit of bandwidth and it's a bit distracting. So if you know your mic or your video is on, please disable those. Secondly, as we put up in the rules, you may ask your questions preferably through the chat function. If you do need to ask it verbally, you can put up your hand, and once you're selected, you then go ahead and do it. The third thing is that the poll in progress. You can see the little green sign up above the screen. What that poll means is just go in there, vote for the particular question that's being asked, and we shall share with you the thing at the end. Finally, there was someone who was asking whether this is being archived. Yes, it is. It's being recorded. As you can see, the little icon. So you're able to access it at any point after this is done, and the details for that shall be shared with you. So the convention is interesting, and we've heard from the two school principals. What you want to do now is very, very briefly, in about 2 or so minutes each, we have representatives of the different alumni association from various schools, and we want to hear from them in terms of their perspective, not so much to repeat what the principals have said, but perhaps to put in some little insight, even if it's just to say hello. And I'll start with people who we don't respect. We have no obligation to be nice to them, but for once, because, and forgive me people, for once, because the girls watching will try and be nice to them. This is the people from the school on Wayakiwe. This is Nairobi School. For once in our lives, we shall be nice to you. So we'll allow your representative, I think it's a chairman of your alumni association, Mr. Mudachi, to very quickly speak, say hi. He's not allowed to say anything negative about Lenana School. Mr. Mudachi.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll hold my decorum and just accept this invitation to say hello. First of all, thank you very much for setting up this. It's quite a commendable effort that you have put this together and to discuss a topic that is quite important and relevant to all of us. I'd just like to say 1 or 2 things and maybe address them to the principals for them to give us their take on this. One, the schools that we went to, I was in Nairobi School in the 90s. So the schools that we went to are very different in terms of capacity from what the schools are today. I was in a class that had 39 people, and we're now talking about class numbers of 50 to 70. I know the state of the facilities in Nairobi School at the moment, and they are very different from what the facilities were, even in terms of space allocation. Now that you're facing a pandemic or a disease that has, where proximity and space is a key component, how do we address this, and how do we give parents confidence, and where can we assist as alumni in trying to help you tackle this? Because like we all agree, the aim is to get the schools back open, and so that the education can continue, because Corona is going to be part and parcel of our lives, just like security is part and parcel of our lives post 9/11 and post Westgate. So how my questions are 2. 1, how are you going to deal with the fact that numbers in the respective schools have exploded and are way more than they were in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s? And 2, how can we step in to assist you in addressing these issues? Thanks.
Thank you, Mudachi. I'll just call the different schools in order. We have representatives from Pangani Girls. I believe there are actually 2, but whoever it is that wants perhaps to speak on behalf of Pango, please go ahead. Pangani Girls, are you there?
Wallace will request that they lift their hand, whoever it is.
Second? The Pangani Pangani representative. If you can lift your hand, please. We have no idea who you are. We know there's maybe about 3 of you who are on the call. So just let us know who's speaking.
Wallace, it's Caroline.
Oh, Caroline, there you are. Yeah, I can see our video coming on. Yeah, please go ahead, Caroline. Unmute yourself and speak.
I can't. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us to this session. It's a very timely and important session, actually, at these unprecedented times. Pangani Girls Alumni Association is actually relatively new. We started in 2015, and we are targeting to be a support system, offer expertise, assistance, mentorship, and scholarship, just like many other alumni. But at this particular time, the main issues are the issue of overcrowding. We know the conditions of the schools, and particularly there is no land for expansion. So in case we are talking of additional classrooms, but I would like to pose to the principals, what is your take about boarding in such a situation? Because we are skirting around this issue. It's one of the issues not being tackled directly. And secondly, I would also like to agree that counseling is very key, and as alumni, we focus so much on this. Thank you, and we are together. In case of any Q&A, we will be available. We are three who can take answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. The next one I'll call upon is Mangu. I believe it's Ronald. Yeah, go ahead. Ronald, you need to unmute and enable your video, I think. I can see you putting your hand up.
Thank you, Wallace. We appreciate Wallace and Frank from Laibon. We really appreciate the invite. So myself, I'm Ronald Kibara Meru, Mangu Alumni 98. So I'm representing the Mangu High School Association. We must say that this is one forum that I think it has come at a very timely time. And as you could hear from the principal of Lenana and also from Alliance, this is something that nobody had expected. It has come at a time when we've just captured what we call the free education. So you can see already the schools already stretched in terms of capacity. But coming from Mangu, what we've been a bit fortunate is at least we had, I would say it was just sheer luck that we've been able to just come up with 100 capacity dormitory. So this is one thing that we are hoping to use when it comes to the measures of at least social distancing. But in terms of what we are doing as an alumni of Mangu, what we embarked on, this was last year, we came and began replacing like the asbestos roofs in most of the classes. So this is going to assist us in terms of water harvesting and water reticulation. So this is going to really help in terms of increasing our hand washing stations and in terms of sanitation and making sure that the students are constantly keeping clean during the time when they come back post-COVID. But in terms of education also, I agree, we must do a bit of online classes and all, but we might have to look at even at the government. You remember back in the day, we used to have things like classes coming up on radio. You know, now not everybody will have phones and all to do the Zoom calls and WhatsApp calls. So maybe it's a challenge we'll be given to government is to come up with classes that can be done also on radio, so that at least wherever, even in the most remote places, I am sure that radio is one thing that is reaching every child out there. Another issue I just wanted to highlight is in terms of, you know, what our CS has always been saying, we are not going to keep doing things the normal way. So we have to look at small practices like, you know, the dormitories. Back in Mangu, we used to have students in Form 1s, Form 2s, Form 3s in one dormitory. Maybe we need to think outside the box now. And let's say we have a class, the class should actually stay together, even when they go to class, and also in the dormitories, we specify that the classes should be for one stream or one form, so that to avoid too much contact, and so that even in times of going to the dining hall, also this will just have to have different measures to ensure that students are not mixing too much and to avoid crowding. You know, when it comes to the measures that the government is talking about in terms of how to reduce the spread of this virus are the 3 C's of crowding, closed places, and also close contact. So these are some of the things that I believe we as both the school, the parents, and the alumni need to look in this area. Just one more point is, maybe, I know you raised a point earlier about how we're going to handle the social distancing. Maybe we need to also think of having tented classes. I know we might not be able to do that for the dorms, but some classes can also be done outside. If we can just come up with tents and ensure that social distancing is happening, this would be even maybe a measure that we could be considering at this time. And my last point on this is, in terms of psychological counseling for most of these students, I'm sure you've already been seeing that a lot of stigma is coming to, in case a patient is discovered to have had COVID and they're released from hospital. Once they go back to the community, it has been hard to get back to be accepted in the society. So you can imagine this also going back into the schools, and in case any of the students has been affected, this is something we'll need to also consider. So I think those are my points for now, but we'll be still available for any comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronald. Just by way of, we need to sort of rescue our reputation. Lenana School actually had this division of the dorms by classes when we were there and way before. So maybe we need to learn from us. I don't know this still exists though. Obviously things have changed in the last 120 years since we were last there. I want to ask the Starehe representative, I think it's Rono or anyone else from Starehe, but I think Rono was on the call, to come in and make his submission. If Rono is still there, I know it's taking a bit of time to unmute and video yourself and everything like that. So if you can unmute yourself, well, you'll be unmuted. There you are, Raymond Rono from Starehe. Unmute and please go ahead and make your submission.
Can you hear me, Wallace?
Can hear you perfectly.
Okay, good. So thank you very much. My name is Raymond Rono. I chair currently the Alumni Society, and thank you very much for inviting us to join in this forum. Listening to the two principals that spoke, it gives a bit of hope that this thing has been thought through, at least not by ourselves only, but everyone is thinking through this. It's a new normal for us in the education sector, and the challenges that are coming up, we just have to deal with. I think for us at Starehe, our biggest concern arises principally by the nature of who Starehe is. As we all know, 70% of our students are basically sponsored students on scholarships, having come from needy homes and this kind of thing. So already, even before the challenge of COVID, we were dealing with a situation of needy children. Listening to Mr. Kemei, basically alluded that a third of Lenana by end of year are struggling with fees. So I would assume that possibly all schools, have this kind of students who require, scholarships and sponsorships and that kind of thing. So we see in Starehe this being a huge challenge. So possibly the 70% would grow to 80 or 90 now that some of them would be hit directly by the economic effect of this pandemic. So how are schools preparing and getting themselves ready to deal with this kind of situation? And for us as an alumni who is closely working with the school through the years to support the sponsorship programs, generating revenues to help in this scholarship and this kind of thing, the time to come in more is even more at this point in time, if the schools are able to to break through these challenges, you will have the need for dorms as it's coming out clearly, need for additional classrooms, changes in how the stakeholders will be relating, teachers and students and subordinate staff, the challenges arising, what, for example, in the unfortunate case that say a school has, a mass infection, how would schools react in such a situation? So we are trying to model, such scenarios. As a brother from Mangu said, can tents, provide opportunities, for purpose of social distancing and creating space that are hygienic and stuff like this. So I guess for us at the Starehe Society, we would like to challenge all the alumni bodies to really play a greater role, especially in ensuring that the economic challenges that are going to be very real as we live with COVID, are able to be alleviated, especially for those students and children that need our support. So this really would be the position that the OSS, Starehe Society, is taking. We note obviously that the schools were also in the process of transitioning to CBC. So maybe the next question to the board of management of schools, to the teachers and principals and the rest, how do we deal with this reality now? How does CBC, that was already raising questions under normal circumstances, how do we deal with it with this new challenge? So these are the kind of questions we are asking. We are also participating strongly within our groups to come up with these answers and make our recommendations to the authorities involved in resolving this. But like I said, the message that our Alumni Association has sent me with is basically to challenge all of us and say yes, as the government, as the BOMs, and as all the stakeholders are working towards resolving the issues around COVID. How can the Alumni Association support those 30% or 70%, whichever the case may be, in our schools that really need our support to ensure that they complete their education in these circumstances? So really, that's the main message that I have been asked to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Rono. I'm hoping my sound and video are on. So we have two more schools fairly quickly. The first one is Kenya High. So if the Kenya High representative could please put her hand up, and she shall be unmuted and also have the ability to put on your video, and then you can speak as soon as that is done. Boma, if you're here, please put your hand up so you can be unmuted. All right, if she's not ready, we have Alliance High School as the last school. But let me just see, I can see a message coming in. John Chepngeno, can Pascal please unmute John Chepngeno?
Okay, hi everyone.
Hi, can you put your video up so they can see you?
I think my network can't allow me, so let me just go ahead and speak, please, Wallace.
It's fine, don't worry.
Okay, so thank you for this opportunity again. I think basically a lot has been said, and two things that I've picked that I think we're overlooking is around how do we ferry the students back to school. Remember, we have our students all the way in Turkana, Mombasa, so how do we ensure that they all arrive safely and probably do not pick up the virus along the way? Something else is I'm really passionate about counseling, and yes, it's a high time for us as the alumni, as part of the token that we're going to appreciate our schools is doing the counseling. And this time, in fact, we've been talking about this in our alumni group, that we are actually going to take an active part in counseling these students as they go to school. Then the other thing is on the vulnerability of our teachers. So I hope the schools are starting to have discussions with TSC, probably to get maybe young teachers that can stand in this time when the old generation cannot take part in teaching. So that is it from this end.
There you go. Thank you very much, Joan. The problem is whenever I hear people speak of young people and old people, you always think you're young until you realize how long ago you were in school. So we don't know where some of us fall in that continuum. But Asante Sana, the final one is presuming that Joan, you're from Kenya High. The final one is from Alliance, a representative from Alliance, please. Put your hand up so you can be unmuted. The Alliance representative, is that Gashao? Yeah, it is. If you can please unmute Gashao, please. Yeah, I think you've been unmuted, Gashao. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kashau. I was in Alliance for 4207. I'm ill-equipped to speak about the Alumni Society because first, I'm not a very active member. And that's a big thing in Alliance. The Alumni Society is very active. So, and second, because I have not been very involved in what they have been doing. All the same, I would like to know from the Alliance High School principal. Of course, we have the same problem with Starehe. I think some of our school students are, most of us, not most, some of us were sponsored. And I have been seeing at home some schools have started online classes, but that would not work for all the students who are currently in Alliance. However, is it possible that maybe we could, as a school, decide how many, just decide how many people can have access to online classes, and then those who cannot maybe can come to school and study. Is it a possibility for such a scenario to take place? Maybe if you are from Turkana, you come for boarding, and maybe you see maybe 80% of the people who are students in Alliance can have parents who have the ability to do online classes. That would be my question. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you, Gashao. And on behalf of Alliance students, of which I was not, can you please become an active member of the Alumni Society? I think the ones who are listening will probably come and beat you up for it. So, ladies and gentlemen, and we are glad there are more ladies now coming in as usual with any funky. The buses from the girls' schools always come in very late when everyone has become quite desperate. But we appreciate that these buses have ferried quite a number of ladies onto the call. There's quite a number of things to digest. And obviously, given the limitations of time, because it's now almost 1:45 for a 2 o'clock ending, we cannot go through everything. There's been a number of things said by the main speakers, that is Mr. Kemei of Lenana, Mr. Mwangi of Alliance, and the school representatives we've had. Some of them are by way of questions. Some of them are by way of suggestions and also insights into the different elements of what it takes to get the schools back in action and to keep the students and staff safe. So without further ado, what I want to do is sort of combine a lot of things that have come through within what has been spoken and a few things that are being asked on the chat, and just remind everyone that there was a poll that was running that I think is now complete. So the quick one to ask, perhaps starting with Mr. Kemei, Mr. Mangu also, if you're back, you can also answer this one, which is I think the most direct thing that would be of interest to everyone here, is fairly briefly, Mr. Kemei, what do you think you need immediately from the alumni? Obviously, there's always resources by way of money, but less that, because that is something that is almost background noise in this environment. But you had hinted as to some of it, which is the technical expertise by people who may have experience and knowledge in medicine, for instance, experience and knowledge in things like construction and use of space and things like that. But without answering my own question, what do you think you need from the alumni at an immediate point of view, in case the announcement is made that schools will be back within sort of the foreseeable future, that you can then get help from us as alumni from whichever school, and it's not just in, on behalf of Lenana School, that can immediately start helping the situation?
Thank you, Wallace. I think, as it has been mentioned, our biggest challenge would always be the social distancing. And the first one would be how we're going to reduce the distance. And as it was mentioned by one of the alumni, Mangu, I think Ronald, mentioned that we would need tents. We've also been thinking around how to expand the classrooms. And one possibility, of course, is a temporary classroom. Number two are the PPEs. This is going to be a must. In a population of about 1,800 students, you will need thermal guns, because you cannot do testing in an institution. Even currently, our own medical facilities are not able to do that. The only measure or the only guarantee that you can assess that all the students are okay is to have proper PPEs, starting with the thermal guns, the sanitizers. We are talking about adequate supply of water. If there has to be anything that we need permanently installed in any institution, would be to have enough adequate running water throughout the period that the students are in school. Lastly, if there was anything that we would need, is how to help the teacher teach all the students at any given time, be it physically or using digital learning and so forth. I guess these are opportunities that exist within government, but knowing the amount of investment the government is going into, as including capitation, I think these are areas the alumni can have a leeway to undertake at their own capacity. Wallace.
Asante sana, Mr. Kemei. Questions are coming in thick and fast. Now, Mr. Kemei, just write this one down. I'll come back to you fairly soon, which is about the experience of Lenana as a quarantine center. It was obviously very much in the news when it served as a current quarantine center. So the experience there and what, basically how that leads into this entire question of when we reopen, or whether any experiences learned there that were of use. I don't know that Mr. Mwangi is back. Unfortunately, there's so many of us that I don't know. I can't see him. Mr. Mwangi, if you're there, please let us know. In the event that Mr. Mwangi is not, I noticed Catherine putting her hand up. I don't know what your last name is, Catherine, but I saw Catherine putting her hand up. Do you still want to ask a question? Catherine? Pascal, there's a Catherine. If you just look in the participants, who you might want to unmute. As we try to unmute Catherine, there's a lot of questions coming in revolving around the same issues to do with the school population, crowding, and everything like that. I think I dare say that that question has been not necessarily answered because no one has a perfect answer to it, but you've seen some suggestions coming through, which is tents or prefabricated structures for the schools, especially schools that have adequate space for that. There's other suggestions, although the workability is obviously going to be quite difficult because the school environment being what it is. where students learn in groups. So I don't call it shifts, but different groups. Whereas you might have one set of students that's sitting in front of a teacher, another set is catching up with this class through electronic means. Another one was where this is even taken to its extreme, where these students are not even physically in the school, they're elsewhere, and they're catching up with classes through electronic means, just in order so that we can have classes much smaller so that the students can be at a distance with each other. So this question I know has been asked quite a number of times in the chat, so that one perhaps we'll leave it at that. Has Catherine been found and has she been able to unmute herself? I notice a big X next to her name. And also Mr. Mwangi, if you're there. Yeah.
Catherine, she's not asking a question. It's her mic that is not available, so ignore the X.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Okay, good. Okay, so Mr. Kemei, because I don't know that Mr. Mangi is here, he can always let me know. There was that question about the quarantine center, Lenana as a quarantine center for the last few weeks. What was that experience like, and what will it mean when things resume?
Thank you, Wallace. Indeed, we hosted a good number of the quarantine individuals who had arrived in the country from various destinations. And we did this for a total of 17 days. And during this period, it was quite an experience, but I think this was beneficial to us as an institution because there are things we have learned. Number one, first of all, we were handling individuals who had been on quarantine from other countries, and therefore they were not ready to be quarantined. So there was a lot of consultation, guidance, and counseling that took place for about 3 days before they calmed down. Thirdly, was also our own staff. We discovered we could not utilize the services of most of our senior staff, especially those who are at the age of 55 and above and have possibly some pre-existing conditions. Number three is the issue of stigma. Apparently, I think we did not do as a country a lot of sensitization from the very beginning. And this is something that also we think should be done even as the students come in. There should be a prior sensitization of staff as well as students to avoid stigmatizing anybody who has been on quarantine. I say this because immediately after we took in the quarantine persons, the community within was very suspicious of any member of Lenana school community. We had to call in the community elders, the chief, the DCC, to do some sensitization about the need to support and have Lenana as a quarantine. However, more relief came in immediately after the center was closed. We carried out fumigation, and this was done by Nairobi County together with the Ministry of Health, and it was extensive such that even the fumigation went beyond the school compound, and the community learned about it, and that assisted. Then finally, all the staff that were on duty were tested for COVID. During the period, it delayed a bit for about, I think, 7 days. During that period, these particular staff were taken through some guidance and counseling, both by doctors from Mbakadi Hospital and a counselor from KMBDU, together with our own staff. But these particular individuals who had been serving during COVID needed more guidance and counseling for their families. And we could not reach their families. And therefore, what we did was to print some flyers that would indicate that they have been tested, and letters that they have been tested, and all of them were negative. However, before that period, even taking these individuals for testing alone, it was a big task. We had to carry out a lot of guidance and counseling. There were some who were of the view that if they were tested and found to be positive, then they would be quarantined further. However, upon counseling, most of the community members, even those who had not participated in the exercise, came out strongly to carry out or to be tested. I'm happy to note that after the testing, all of them were found negative, but they were given a period of 14 days to self-quarantine. And they've become very good ambassadors. Right now, as we discuss about reopening, they don't seem to exhibit the fear that we witness elsewhere. They even don't seem to exhibit the fear that some parents are trying to imagine the institution need to be sanitized again. We think, anyway, maybe for purposes of continuous sanitation, this fumigation will be continuous. However, my most important lesson was the fact that COVID is something that, as Mr. Mwangi put it, it is here with us, and we need to take it positively, that the actions both the government and institutions have put in place have the capacity to mitigate against the spread of the disease. However, any form of negligence can also cause the spread. It can be very serious. And we noticed this during our time because one of our security personnel, without observing the bare minimum precautions, went ahead to handle the property, the luggage, and other items belonging to this particular staff. Well, he was quarantined officially by the team that was managing the center, and later on he found he was positive, although he never showed any signs at all. He never experienced any sickness of any kind. But one thing that was a lesson to all of us was that you do not have to know that somebody has COVID for you to take care of the basic minimum precautionary measures. We all need to understand that since you do not know who has COVID and who does not have, there are those who are asymptomatic, and there are more than those who are symptomatic. And that is very important education to both the learners, the teachers, and even all to the public, that most of the people are asymptomatic. I think, Kantai, I would not wish to go beyond that, other than the challenge of the use of the social media. There was a lot of pressure.
Sorry, I think, Mr. Kemei, we are losing you. I think your sound has just cut off, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. Just wanted to read out the poll results. I think they flashed, but I'm not sure they're still available to all of us. So the first question was, do you agree that public boarding schools are ready to guarantee the health of students in the post-COVID-19 near future? Strongly agree was 2%, agree was 7%, neutral 21%, disagree 43%, strongly disagree 27%. So if my mathematics is correct, about 70% of people either disagree or strongly disagree with the question of whether public boarding schools are ready to guarantee the health of students in the post-COVID-19 near future. The second question was about us. Do you agree that alumni associations should play a more active role in deciding when and how their alma mater reopen and run post-COVID-19? There, the results are the exact opposite. Strongly agree is 39%, agree 40%, neutral 17%, disagree 4%, strongly disagree 1%, which means about 79%, if my mathematics again is correct, either agree or strongly disagree with the notion that alumni associations should play a more active role in deciding when and how the alma mater reopens and is run post-COVID-19. Now, I just want to bring in something very interesting that has just come across before I ask someone else to speak, which is Macharia Gaido, who was in Lenana School in, I think he finished in 1978, fairly well known to a whole load of us who read the newspapers. But he asks the question to the two principals: if, for instance, the government decides that schools will reopen on July the 1st, what contingency measures have you already put in place to deal with this unique situation? What kind of budgets? Coincidentally, almost immediately, someone who I know fairly well, Mary Kihagi, has responded. I don't know that she was responding directly to Macharia, but this response is quite apt. She says, Mary Kihagi, that's obviously just by way of introduction, I work for a financial institution and we are offering different financial facilities to enable schools and parents acquire different equipment for digital learning as well as manage their overhead costs. We are also open to discuss any other needs that schools have with a view to collectively find possible solution. And she says, feel free to reach out. That was always a good thing when a funky ends and someone says, feel free to reach out to them. So if you are interested in this offer from Mary Kihagi, you can send a perfumed letter in a nice envelope to me, and I shall put you in touch with her, and we can get that sorted out. This offer for the financing of facilities to enable schools and parents acquire different equipment for digital learning. More questions are coming in, and we shall take those. Sheila from Pangani Girls, which is just in front of me, so let me just read it in response to Kizito Hisa. I'll try and find that question. Digital learning has been with us in a while, pointing out that as a national school, this is Pangani of students from all over Kenya, and follow up with sponsor school fees, many of whom cannot afford smartphones with smart technology, let alone computers. So truth is that most Kenyans are not progressing in the curriculum and now busy doing chores around the home. This is, I think, a reality that many of us are familiar with. Fairly quickly, we are now, I think it's 2 minutes past 2, but I think with the permission of everyone, you can go on maybe until 1/4 just to make sure we wrap up this nicely. I want to ask Dr. Samson Ndegwa, who is the chair of the BOM at Lenana School. I will not reveal secrets about Dr. Ndegwa because he's a Pacherian, but he has kindly offered to assist Lenana School in various ways. We just hope that he's not sabotaging us, but we'll be nice to him. So Dr. Ndegwa, please, if you can just come in from a BOM perspective. Lots of issues have been raised with budgets with regard to what alumni can do and different things like that.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really a privilege for me to address this August gathering. And I would like to start by saying that in Lenana School, we have benefited a lot from the Laibon, the old Yorkists, and I think they've now become part and parcel of the school administration. I don't know where we would be without the old boys. But there's one thing I would like to say to all the schools and all the alumni and all these old societies. You know, the board is appointed by the minister or the CS. And many boards have got a lot of limitation because sometimes they want to take some decisions, but you find they're restricted because then if they do something that is not in conformity with the policy or directive of the ministry, then there is an issue. I know I've come across a few boards who have openly defied some of those unreasonable directives. But what I would like to say is that the alumni or the old boys, these societies have got a vital part to play because for them, they are not tied by anybody at all. And in fact, what I found out and my experience at Lenana is that with the support of the old boys or the old girls for other schools, I think with the Lenana, the old boys have made a difference. Mine is to appeal to all these societies of the old boys and the old girls to participate actively in the running of the school. I'm not saying they have to directly interfere with the running of the school. Obviously, the school administration will run the school, but the old boys can actually make a big difference. And mine is really to encourage them. At Lenana, we work as a team. We have all the participants, and all of them are welcome. And what we do is that we take views and we deal with the consensus. The other thing I would like to say, now that I have this opportunity, you know, they say necessity is the mother of invention. I think with the COVID-19, we have invented this way of communicating. Mine is to encourage more schools, and more so the so-called national schools and the ones of around Nairobi. I think even after COVID-19, post-COVID-19, I think these meetings should be encouraged because it is something that will help the schools. And you can also exchange views, because like sitting here today, listening to suggestions from all the schools, I realize, I think all of us have a part to play. And I think we should take this opportunity to play our part and do it positively, because we are there to assist our institutions. And I can tell you, many schools, especially the national schools, you know, in the olden days, you remember there was a lot of grants coming from even the ministry. But many principals, or most of the principals, will tell you that, in fact, not many, all of them will tell you that even the national schools who used to get these grants no longer get these grants. And that leaves the burden to the parents. And as you know also, some of our parents are quite oppressed in other areas, and they need help. So I think it's by bringing our resources together that we can see good development for our institutions now and in the future. Thank you very much. I would like to stop there. And once again, Asante for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndegwa. The conversation is going on thick and fast. Now, there's a very interesting point that has been made and is being made. It was made originally, I think, by Caroline, which is, the way I wrote it down, which I think is a question itself, is the boarding school dead? And the reason for that is there's all the concern about the students being in a confined space. And obviously, even if you are to socially distance the students by putting the beds far apart and everything, people in their teenage are fairly social beings. And so that may not necessarily be perfect. So this question has been asked, and it's been followed up by quite a number of people. I see Karaoke Njoroge has asked it again. Do you think the boarding school model is sustainable? Capacitating local high schools to be good day schools? That I don't know whether it's a question that we can comprehensively handle in a chat like this, because it goes right to the heart of even what the school identities, schools' identities are. We think about the schools that we're talking about, Lenana, Nairobi School, Mangu, Alliance, and all the rest. If you're going to be getting students from all over the country, obviously, if you're to restrict it to a day school, that means that the character of the schools changes to be schools that are only attracting people from basically a catchment area where people can come in and out by the day. So this, I think, is a question that's going to be animated once the schools start reopening and we see the dynamics of all that. Trying to see whether there's anything else that perhaps can be handled very quickly. Levi Wataka from Kibaki House in Lenana School is asking, we in education are overwhelmed by systemic challenges. Solutions will have to innovate ways to absorb or deflect external pressure for the good of the young people in schools. This needs principal school masters, a rarity in our industry today. That's, I think, an insight from Mr. Wataka that is quite interesting. Tess Gitao says, having a sibling or a child with pre-existing conditions like asthma, especially young men who are mostly still new to the idea, who are mostly still new to the idea of disinfecting their hands. Thank you very much, Tess. So the questions that she's asking, and again, some of this will simply absorb and you can continue the conversations. Our number one, what are the measures that will be put in place for them? Number two, the protocol for teachers who will be coming and going, interacting with their families and communities at large. And number three, most of our hospitals and corporates are being disinfected, some by the hour or every 2 hours. Will this be implemented in schools with big populations, or what is the plan? Again, these are questions. Some of them have been handled in the conversations. Some of them are things to think about. I think I want to perhaps, given the hour that we are in, to maybe give the last word. I don't know that Mr. Mwangi is back for either Pascal or Frank, who are monitoring who's on and who's not. Are they there? No. So I'll give the last word to Mr. Kemei fairly quickly, if there's anything that has struck you that we can handle, and then we can start winding up. Mr. Kemei?
Thank you, Wallace. Just one of you for your participation on this forum. One most important thing is that a question has been asked about the viability of boarding schools in the context of COVID-19. I would want to say that I think we need to carry on this conversation to the next level. 2023 will be starting off with CBC, which in itself requires massive facilities within the institutions. My take is that boarding facilities, we may need to rethink and to begin to reimagine what schools should be. If we're still going to have national institutions, how are we going to have them within the context of COVID as we prepare for CBC? Because at the time of CBC, we will still be faced with the same similar challenges. And therefore, boarding remains an area that as a country, our attitudes have to change, our culture have to change. And therefore, Kantai has alluded to the fact that their traditions, their identity issues with institutions, this is a conversation that we may have to deliberately address it going forward. Lastly, as I said earlier on, reopening of school, as Mwangi also mentioned, assumes that there's so much time that is required, there's so much time that has been lost, and we need to recover it. However, with the challenges of preparedness, I think we call on all the support from the alumni, from the partners, to bring in their expertise so that then schools and institutions can start off. Even if it means starting off only with one class, I think that will give us a better view of how things would be. I wish you well and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kemei, to Mr. Mwangi in absentia, and to all of us for what has been quite an engaging discussion. I know we don't have nearly enough time to get into everything, and I think a lot of us would have wanted to participate in person. But I think this is a good start for a conversation such as this. The good thing about technology is that these things can always be continued in other forum and offline, including in the different groups, WhatsApp groups for the Alumni Societies, on other platforms such as that. Fairly quickly, just by way of keeping you updated, Frank, who is the chairman of the Lenana Alumni Society, that's the Laibon Society, is just making it clear that the meeting report, which is for this particular conference call, will be shared in the next 24 hours with each association. So you're able to share this much wider to the people who may not have been on this particular call. We also intend to have a follow-up session in the weeks ahead with the Principal Secretary of Education once a task force report is available. As you very well know, this conversation has been ongoing quite intensely within the government with regard to when, whether, and how to reopen the schools and the entire education sector to ensure that the students will be back in a safe way, but also for education to continue. This is a process that's ongoing. We obviously expect some sort of announcement in the next 2 days from the president with regard to more generally how the country, if and how the country will reopen. So we're all keeping very close tabs on that. So my encouragement to you is to please share this conversation. The recording will be available to you. Share it to the alumni groups, and also actually wider than that, with people who are parents or people who are parents, in the different schools, to see how things will progress. Also, just keep your ears to the ground as to how even other countries are doing it. I think the UK was attempting to open its schools, Australia and other countries of that nature, and the experiences that they've had since with regard to safety, with regard to ability to provide education and everything of that nature, which will, I think, guide us quite a bit in Kenya to see how things happen. I think South Africa as well has been reconsidering the reopening of schools and other countries in the immediate neighborhood. So with that, asanteni sana, please do have yourselves a good afternoon. Please keep safe. If you're in any distress whatsoever, reach out to someone who is able to help. But for now, thank you very much. This is the end of the Funky. If unfortunately you didn't manage to do the right thing in this Funky, you can always try for next time. But thank you. We shall let you know when the next one is, especially these ones that involve many more people than just a single school. And if you do see that notice, please feel free to come and join us, and we'll have that discussion. Santini, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Wallace. Thank you, everyone.